Good evening. Wherever you are right now, let your body soften just a little. If you are lying down, let the bed hold you a bit more. If your shoulders are somewhere near your ears, let them drop. There is nothing to carry tonight. You do not need to take notes. You do not need to remember any of this. If you drift off before we are finished, that is exactly right. The words will find their way in softly, the way warmth does. Tonight, we are going to talk about something very quiet, something most people never notice because it makes no noise at all. It does not announce itself. It does not show up in photographs. You cannot wear it or drive it or display it at a dinner party. We are going to talk about the space between what you earn and what you spend. That space, that gap, that is where everything begins. Let yourself settle a little more. Take one slow breath and let it go without effort. We have all the time in the world. There is a number that matters more than almost any other number in your financial life. It is not your salary. It is not your net worth. It is not the return on any investment you have ever made. It is the difference between what comes in and what goes out each month. That is it, that simple, unsexy number. Call it the gap, the margin, the leftover. Different names, same idea. What remains after the world has taken its share, after rent, after groceries, after all the ordinary costs of living, and you have taken yours. When that number is positive, however small, something becomes possible. A quiet possibility, like a door left slightly open. When that number is 0 or below 0, that door is closed. And keeping it closed takes effort, ongoing effort, the kind that wears you down over time, not all at once, but slowly, the way water wears stone. So much of the anxiety people feel about money is not really about the total. It is about the gap, or the absence of one. When the gap is small, small surprises become emergencies. A car repair, a medical bill, a month where everything costs a little more than usual. These are not disasters, objectively, but without margin, they feel like disasters, because they are. They tip you over. When the gap exists, even a modest one, those same events are inconveniences. Annoying, maybe, but not destabilizing. You absorb them the way a good coat absorbs a cold wind. You feel it, but you are not undone by it. That is the first thing worth understanding tonight. The gap is not just a financial strategy. It is the difference between a life that feels precarious and a life that feels steady. And steadiness, it turns out, is a form of wealth. One of the most underrated forms. Let your breathing slow just a little more. There is no hurry. Here is something that might seem strange at first. The wealthiest people in a room are often not the most visible ones. You have probably heard versions of this idea before, but it is worth sitting with slowly because it cuts against something very deep in us, the part that has learned over years of living in the world to read status through objects, through cars and clothes and watches, and the size of the space someone occupies. We did not invent this. We inherited it. It is ancient, the human instinct to signal and to read signals. Tribes did it. Courts did it. We do it. But money is different from those older status games in one important way. Money is invisible when it is actually working. The person at the party in the expensive suit might be carrying significant debt to maintain that appearance. The quiet person in the corner wearing something ordinary might be sitting on years of accumulated savings. You simply cannot tell. The signals have been decoupled from the reality. This is not cynical. It is actually freeing if you let it be. It means you are not obligated to perform wealth. It means the accumulation of real financial security can happen in private, without an audience, without approval, without anyone knowing at all. Real wealth, in its early stages, looks like nothing. It looks like a savings account with a balance that does not show. It looks like a car that works, but does not impress. It looks like a kitchen where most meals are made at home. It looks like nights in instead of nights out sometimes. Not always, not joylessly, but sometimes. What is invisible is not absent. That is the truth underneath this. The person building something real is not building it in public. They are building it in the gap, in that quiet space between earning and spending. They are pouring into it slowly, steadily, without fanfare. And the thing they are building does not flash or sparkle, but it holds. It holds when things get hard. It holds when the unexpected arrives. It holds over years and then decades, quietly growing, accumulating a kind of gravity. Think of an iceberg if the image is a gentle one for you. What you see above the surface tells you very little. The real mass is below, unseen, stable, heavy. That is what living below your means builds, the part you do not see. Let us think about what the gap actually does once it exists. Not in numbers tonight. Numbers are for daytime. Instead, imagine something mechanical, something reliable and unhurried. Imagine a very old, very simple engine. It does not roar. It does not accelerate dramatically. It simply turns steadily, producing a small amount of energy with every rotation. And that energy, instead of being spent, is stored. Week after week, month after month, the engine turns, the storage grows. And here is the part that matters. The stored energy begins to produce its own small amount of energy, not from the engine, from itself, just from existing in sufficient quantity. This is the heart of how saving compounds over time. You are not just adding what you put in. What you have already put in begins to add too. Slowly at first, then less slowly, then, over a long enough span, significantly. But none of this works without the gap. Without the gap, there is nothing to store. The engine runs, and the energy is used the moment it is produced, and there is nothing left to accumulate. The gap is the prerequisite for all of it, for compounding, for security, for freedom, for options. And here is what often goes unsaid. The gap does not have to be enormous to matter. It does not require deprivation. It does not require living a smaller life than you actually want to live. It requires only that the outflow stays consistently a little below the inflow. Consistently is the word that matters there. Not dramatically, not drastically, consistently. A river does not move mountains through force. It moves them through patience and consistency. Given enough time, water reshapes stone, not by being strong, by being steady. Let that image settle. Water, stone, patience, time. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that no one talks about very directly. It is the exhaustion of maintaining an image. When the spending rises to match or exceed the earning, something subtle begins to happen. the life begins to require its own maintenance. Every month, the same amount must come in or something breaks. There is no cushion, no give. Every income level brings expenses calibrated precisely to meet it, and sometimes to exceed it. This is sometimes called lifestyle inflation, which is a fair name, but it does not quite capture the feeling of it, which is closer to a kind of tightening. You earn more, and for a moment there is relief, a little looseness, a sense of possibility. And then, gradually, almost without noticing, the spending expands to fill the space. The nicer apartment, the newer car, the restaurants that cost a little more, the wardrobe that requires more tending. And soon, sometimes very soon, the tightness is back. Because the expenses have caught up to the earnings, the way a shadow catches up to the person casting it. This is not a moral failure. It is simply what happens when we are not paying attention. When we let the standards of our social world, the people around us, the images we see, the signals we absorb without realizing, determine what feels normal to spend. The exhausting thing is not the spending itself. It is the dependency. When the spending is high and the gap is small, you are dependent on the income continuing, on nothing going wrong, on the conditions that allow this particular level of outflow remaining in place, month after month, indefinitely. That dependency hums in the background. You may not hear it consciously, but it is there. It is the quiet anxiety of financial fragility, the sense that things are fine as long as everything stays exactly as it is. Living below your means is the antidote to that dependency. Not because frugality is a virtue in itself, but because the gap it creates gives you room. And room, financial room, breathing room, margin, is one of the quietest sources of peace available to you. You do not have to be at full capacity every month to feel okay. You can live within something smaller than your maximum and be fine, more than fine. You can be free. Think about the last time you were not worried about money, even for a short stretch, even briefly. Do you remember how the rest of life felt during that time? A little lighter, perhaps. The small annoyances that usually snag your attention moved through more easily. A parking ticket was irritating, but not frightening. A slow week at work was uncomfortable, but not catastrophic. You could make decisions, small ones, large ones from a place of consideration rather than desperation. That is what margin does. It does not buy happiness, but it removes a particular kind of unhappiness. The grinding, low-level stress of financial tightness. The arithmetic that runs in the background of a mind that is not sure the numbers will work out this month. Financial stress is one of the most persistent forms of stress humans carry. Studies have shown what most people already know from living it. When money is tight, cognitive bandwidth narrows. The mind works harder on the arithmetic of survival and has less capacity for everything else, for creativity, for patience, for the quality of attention we bring to the people we love. Margin creates space in the mind, not just in the bank account. When you live below your means, you are not just building a financial buffer. You are building a psychological one, a zone of tolerance around the unpredictability of life, a buffer against the worst of what it feels like when things go unexpectedly wrong. And they will sometimes. That is not pessimism. That is just the nature of a long life. Things go wrong. Incomes shift. Health costs arise. Plans fall apart. The world changes in ways no one predicted. The question is not whether difficulty arrives. It is whether you meet it from solidity or from the edge. Living below your means is how you move away from the edge. Gradually, quietly, without drama. The calm you feel when there is a cushion beneath you, that is not an accident. That is the return on the gap. Not a financial return exactly. A felt one. A life return. Let your eyes stay closed if they are. Let that thought rest somewhere comfortable. Here is one of the most important reframings in all of personal finance. Living below your means is not the same as living a small life. These two things are so often conflated. People here spend less than you earn, and they imagine restriction, counting, saying no, a life of deliberate smallness where pleasure is always deferred and enjoyment is always slightly out of reach. That is not what this is. Think about the pleasures that tend to be most genuinely satisfying in a human life. The things people look back on and feel warm about years later. They are almost never the most expensive things. A long meal cooked at home with people you love. A walk that costs nothing but time. A book that took take you somewhere else for a few hours. A cup of something warm on a slow morning. Laughter, conversation, the particular satisfaction of making something with your hands. A night outside under a clear sky. These things are not inaccessible to someone living modestly. Many of them are more available to someone living modestly because that person has time. And time, it turns out, is what most of the best pleasures actually require. The expensive life often demands an expensive income, and an expensive income demands a great deal of work, and that work demands a great deal of time, and time is quietly, gradually consumed in service of maintaining the spending. The modest life, below the means, generates something the expensive life often cannot. Slack margin, options, the luxury of choosing. You may be able to take the slower job, the one that fits your life better. You may be able to say no to the project that feels wrong. You may be able to take a month between things, to breathe, to reconsider, without the machinery of your financial life seizing up. Those choices, the ability to make them without panic, that is the luxury. Not the watch, not the car, not the apartment in the more impressive neighborhood. The freedom to choose is the most underrated luxury in modern life. And living below your means is how you purchase it. Slowly, incrementally, without anyone noticing. Let us stay with this idea a little longer, because it matters. The story we often tell about saving, about living below your means, is a story of sacrifice, of giving things up, of saying no to what you want so that some future version of you can have something better. And there is some truth in that. Of course there is. You cannot spend everything now and also have something later. Time is real, and choices are real, and money spent in one direction is not available in another. But sacrifice is the wrong frame, and the wrong frame makes the whole thing feel like deprivation, which makes it harder to sustain and less pleasant to live inside. The better frame is freedom. Every time you choose to spend less than you could, you are not giving something up. You are buying something. You are buying a small amount of future freedom, a widening of future options, a reduction in future dependency. It is an exchange, a fair one, not a punishment. Think of it this way. The person who spends everything they earn is not freer. They They are more constrained in a specific and important way, constrained to keep earning at that level, constrained to keep the conditions of their life stable enough to maintain that outflow, constrained to hope that nothing goes wrong. The person who lives below their means, who tolerates a smaller or simpler version of their life in some areas, is purchasing the freedom to be less constrained by all of that. They are building optionality, a word that sounds cold and financial, but the experience of it is warm. The experience of it is breathing room. The experience of it is the ability to say, if something is not right, I can change it. That is not sacrifice. That is the purchase of something precious. And the pleasant surprise is that the purchase price is often not as high as it feels. You do not have to give up what is genuinely meaningful to you. You have to be willing to let go of what was never really meaningful. What you were spending on out of habit, or social pressure, or the quiet pull of wanting to keep up with some standard that was not really yours. When you look carefully at the spending and ask honestly, what here actually brings me something real, the answer is often surprising. Much of it does. Some of it does not, and you would not miss it. Finding the things you would not miss and quietly letting them go, that is where the gap begins to open, without loss, just clarification. There is a quality that underlies everything we have talked about tonight. It is patience. Not the dramatic kind, not the grinding your teeth, white-knuckle patience of waiting for something you desperately want. The other kind, the calm kind, the kind that feels less like waiting and more like trust. The financial life of someone who lives below their means has a particular arc. It is not exciting. In the early years, it does not look like much is happening. The gap is small. The accumulation is small. There is no dramatic inflection point to celebrate. But something is happening. Beneath the surface, quietly, the way roots grow. Every month that the gap is maintained, something is added to the store. Every year that passes, the store grows larger. And the larger the store, the more it grows on its own. Slowly at first, then a little less slowly. This is not a metaphor for something abstract. This is how it actually works. Consistently maintaining a gap between income and spending over enough time produces results that seem disproportionate to the effort. Not immediately, not even soon, But eventually, the difficulty is the time. The difficulty is that we live in a world calibrated to impatience, to immediate feedback, immediate gratification, immediate validation. The progress of a long-term financial plan produces none of these things. It is invisible for years. It asks you to act without evidence, to trust without proof, to tend something you cannot see growing. That is genuinely hard. It asks something of us that the modern world has not been particularly good at cultivating. But here is what helps. The good life, the one worth wanting, is also a long thing. It is not an event. It is not a destination you arrive at. It is a long, steady accumulation of ordinary days, lived with some amount of ease and some amount of choice. And the financial version of that long life mirrors the lived version. It is not a sprint to a finish line. It is tending something over time with steadiness, with the patience of someone who has decided they are playing a long game. The people who have done this, who have lived modest lives relative to their income, for years, for decades, often describe reaching a point where the financial worry simply stops. Not because everything is perfect, but because the store beneath them has grown large enough that the ordinary difficulties of life no longer threaten the foundation. That point, that quiet, stable arrival, is the product of a very long accumulation of invisible, unspectacular choices. The gap, maintained month after month, year after year. There is something almost meditative about it, a practice more than a project, a way of moving through the world. One more thing before we close. So much of our spending is not really ours. What I mean is this: the things we buy, the size of the home, the type of car, the neighborhood, the clothes, the restaurants, the vacations. Many of these choices are not made in stillness, from a clear sense of what we actually value. They are made in response to signals, social signals, the standard of the people around us, the image of a certain kind of life that we absorbed from somewhere and quietly decided we should have. It is not anyone's fault. These signals are everywhere. They are designed to be everywhere in a world built largely around the engine of consumption. But they are not always yours. One of the gentle gifts of living below your means, of stepping back from the automatic expansion of spending, is that it creates the space to ask a question you might not otherwise ask. What do I actually want? Not what do people like me have? Not what does someone at my income level spend their money on? Not what would signal success to the people in my life? What when I imagine a day that feels genuinely good, genuinely mine? What does it actually contain? The answer is often simpler than the spending would suggest. Often quieter, often less expensive. The things that most reliably make a human life feel rich are not the most costly things. Connection, purpose, time, health, peace, the feeling of being somewhere that is right for you, doing something that is right for you, with people who are right for you. These things are not free exactly, but they do not require the maximum level of spending either. They require attention, care, time, presence. And all of those are more available to you when the spending is below the income, when there is room, when the margin exists, when the engine of your financial life is not running at the absolute limit of its capacity just to keep up. The modest life, the one lived below your means, can be, quietly, the fullest kind. Not despite its simplicity, but because of it. Because what you are not spending on is not gone. It is converted into time, into freedom, into the ability to say yes to what actually matters and no to what does not. That is not a small thing. That is, in some ways, the whole thing. We have covered a lot of ground tonight, and you do not need to hold any of it tightly. Let it drift. Let it settle wherever it wants to. The gap between what you earn and what you spend, that is the engine of everything. It does not have to be dramatic. It just has to be there. Invisible wealth is still wealth. The accumulation that no one sees is still accumulation. What is beneath the surface is not absent. It holds. The calm of margin is real. Financial room creates psychological room. The ability to absorb difficulty without being undone. That is one of the quieter forms of luxury, and one of the most worth having. And modest living, when it is chosen freely, is not deprivation. It is the purchase of freedom, the purchase of options, the purchase of a life that has some give in it, some room to breathe. You do not need to figure any of this out tonight. You do not need to make any decisions. You do not need to change anything at this moment. Tonight, you can simply rest. Rest with the knowledge that the gap, however small it is, or might become, is working. Even when you cannot see it, even when nothing visible is happening, the quiet accumulation continues. The engine turns. The store grows. And you are already, simply by paying attention to these ideas, moving in the right direction. Let your breathing slow. Let the day release. You have done enough. You are enough. Sleep well